Hello, everyone. I'm Dominique Johnson-Lindsay, and I want to welcome you to the Active Listener podcast by Lightspeed. As a lifelong learner and the daughter of a Navy veteran who became an elementary school teacher, education and service are in my DNA. This foundation, paired with my love of technology, led me to these conversations with remarkable minds shaping the K-12 landscape. Join us as we amplify these vital voices and explore how active listening remains foundational to educational excellence. Whether you're an educator, administrator, or someone passionate about the future of education, there's something here for you to learn. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Active Listener Podcast. Today, I'm here with Dr. Andrea Trotter. I'm so excited to get started and have this conversation. But before we get started, I want to allow you, Dr. Trotter, to just introduce yourself and just kind of let us know what you're currently doing.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dr. Andrea Trotter, and I am currently an assistant principal at Monticello High School in Virginia. We are located just right outside the outskirts of Charlottesville. So, a popular place, UVA, Thomas Jefferson, the mountains, really pretty area.
Okay, perfect. So I always like to start at the beginning because I know education is such a unique field. People come in by all kinds of different ways and for all kind of different reasons. So what originally inspired you to pursue a career in education?
Originally, I was just really selfish. My daughter was still in school. I was like running things solo and I just needed to have her schedule. But I fell in love with the career, working with students, knowing that every day is different. There's always a new adventure to see, and I get off for snow days. So, it sort of kind of works out.
I like it. I like it. So, I know you've had a lot of different roles. So, obviously, currently being a assistant principal. Talk to me about what the pathway was like coming in, being like a classroom teacher, and then eventually making that progression to school leadership.
So I started off as a sixth grade English teacher, and that was fun. But coming from a military background, I did 5, almost 6 years in the military. Before that, I worked in a factory, and the factory was just unfulfilling, and I wanted something more to do. I needed like a career. Eh, There's a difference between a job and a career. So I wanted a career. And then I got into the military, and being a single parent in the military is just not the way to go. Because if they tell you you got 24 hours, you got 24 hours, kids or no kids. So I became a sixth grade English teacher, and I loved being in the classroom. But I felt like I needed to do more. And I felt like the classroom wasn't my last stop. So I became an instructional coach at a high school, and that involved like going into everybody else's classroom and sort of kind of teaching the teachers how to teach. This is still only one part of the job. As an administrator, you have so many different roles. So how can I learn like everything under this umbrella and be good at my job? So my next stop was a testing coordinator. So I felt like, okay, so I have the instructional piece, I have the testing piece, and there's one more piece that I need, and that's actually the building leadership. So that led me here to Monticello, where I'm currently an assistant principal. This is year 5, and I am praying that if the Lord sees my next stop as a building principal and have my own building, that that will happen soon.
I love it. I love it. I even love hearing about your journey. So my mother is a first grade teacher, and she has a really similar background to you as far as she was enlisted in the Navy. She did that for a certain period of time. She came out and was a civilian and worked kind of regular jobs where she didn't love them. And then because of me and my sister and just school schedule, she kind of aligned to, come into being a teacher and have loved it, has done it for 20 plus years. My mom actually doesn't even want to get out the classroom, which is so unique. Yeah. Love it. So I love just hearing about, what brought you to that. And as far as being a building principal, because obviously that's the next logical step. And I know you sound so excited about even wanting to do that. Tell me what you think is kind of the thing that you would bring to that role that's either unique or different, or you just haven't had a chance to implement yet as far as being an assistant principal?
So I am truly blessed to have the team that I work with. Our current building principal, she allows us a lot of autonomy in the building. So I've been able to come in and put some things in place and test out some things. Some things work, some things haven't. But we always strive to get as many kids across the stage at the end of the year as possible. Like graduation is like huge. But of course, in the state of Virginia, you have all these tests that you have to pass. You got specific courses that you have to take. And traditional school isn't for everyone. So trying to mesh the it's not for me with the I want to do this is the the thing that drives me. So trying to find some path for students who want to be in the public school, who want to graduate, but are too anxious, to the anxiety just grabs them and they can't. Um, Students who have been bullied, students who have never stepped foot in a traditional school. So trying to find programs for those is really where I want to go next. And we've had some students come through here who just didn't want to be here. So learning how to schedule students to condense or decrease the amount of time they got to be here. Um, Putting behavior plans in place so they can still thrive in the classroom without feeling like someone is shackling them to a chair. Things like that is what really drives me, and trying to figure out like how to help the kids who traditionally don't get the help.
I love that. And I think it's really important to do that because now I think we recognize a little bit more. I say this loosely, that we recognize a little bit more that that is the truth, that there are lots of kids that, don't love traditional school, but that doesn't mean they don't want to achieve and ultimately succeed. And so finding those kind of unique areas where they can still fit in and still have success after high school, I think is so important, especially in a landscape where I don't think we know all the jobs yet. I think we're more comfortable saying that we don't know what all the jobs are going to be. At one point in time, even when I was in school, I've talked about this in other episodes, but when I was in school, we kind of had these very defined paths about, you'll go to school and do a thing. And now it's like, I don't think anyone could have envisioned the ideal of being like an AI engineer or something like that. We just didn't even know that that job existed. Even something as simple as being a social media manager, that wasn't really a thing. So the opportunities are really endless for students to just develop their own path. Even entrepreneurship, there are so many kids that come out much earlier ready to start a business or wanting to start a business at least. I think my next question really falls along the lines of, what does it look like to get these types of things implemented in school? Like even just your vision at the highest level, like what does it look like? And the reason I'm asking is because I've always noticed that as I talk to people about these conversations, there's no shortage of ideas. It's always the implementation that's kind of the friction point. And so what does it look like to actually get something implemented into a school?
It's not a simple answer. The kids are different than when I grew up, and from, listening to my daughter, kids were different than when she grew up. And you're right, like AI has created all of these new opportunities for students. And I think that we need to be open to the change that AI has brought into this world. And we need to be open to some of the new ideas that don't seem quite right to us. And some of the things that we have already implemented is just getting them the basic, this is what you need to graduate, give you the bare bones, the skeleton, and let you move forward with your next path. But honestly, it's going to take the higher ups to look at the policies and say, okay, we can do that or we can allow this. Because we know that learning Virginia and US history is not going to help me build a house. And I might want to just build houses. I might want to pick up a hammer and some nails and be like, you know what? This is where I'm at in life. And the other thing is, you know, if you tell a student that they can't graduate unless they pass this test with a specific score, some of them get so nervous and so anxious internally that they just can't function. What do you do with those students? If you want to build a house for a living, can you build me a tiny house and show me that you have some skills? So finding those types of paths will require us to change the policies to say, okay, an advanced diploma is 26 credits, but a standard diploma is only 22. Well, can't you go to college with 22 or 26? Must I make you get 26 to say you were advanced? And what advantages are you going to have if you have those 26 credits versus the 22? But making the policymakers see and understand those things will be the most important. Unfortunately, the policymakers are not boots on the ground with the rest of us. So it takes a lot of talking and networking and connections and government relations in order to make those things happen.
That makes total sense. And we definitely see that over and over again with how government and education kind of work together. There's always like a little bit of a lag. There's a lot of advocacy that comes from teachers and leaders about what things need to happen in the school before we actually start to see those changes. So it's so important and it's good work, but I know it's also like exhausting because there's still stuff to do every single day inside of school. So totally get that. Amongst all of the things that teachers and school leaders have to do, one thing that comes to mind for me just having this conversation about preparing kids for what the next step is, developing their soft skills. That is something I'm always curious about for two different reasons. One is because at Lightspeed, one of the things we offer are microphones in the classroom. And so these are designed for teachers and students. And so we notice that there's a level of confidence that just comes from children speaking up in classrooms and being able to share their thoughts with, their classmates, being able to express things to teachers. And I feel like speaking is almost like a lost art in school because there's so much technology, especially, on the computer itself. So talk to me about not only public speaking, but just like how do you all approach preparing them with these kind of like soft skills in a world that is requiring them to have more and more hard technical skills?
One of the things that has happened in the state of Virginia is the no cell phone policy. Well, it's a law now, signed by Governor Youngkin last year that says no cell phones are allowed in school from the first bell of the day until the last bell of the day. And what we noticed, especially this year since we started the school year with this new law, is last year when we were walking around at lunch and looking at the students, all of them had their heads down. They were on their phones, looking at videos, scrolling. But now there's a no cell phone policy. Students can't have them. So now you see students talking to each other and actually interacting. And the other thing we did was we asked for the community to donate games so they can play games at lunch. So they have Uno, they have Connect Four, they have all of these board games that, if you want, you can just play games during lunch. So that has really opened up a lot more communication for the students. Still not perfect because still you see that one kid that thinks they're sneaky enough to have their phone away, but or of course we have the nice Apple watches that I can still text somebody on my watch, or a student says, "May I go to the bathroom?" and their phone is in their back pocket. 20 minutes later, we're like, "Where's this kid at?" We still have those, but having them having the requirement by law to have their cell phones away for the day has truly helped some of their communication skills because they're almost forced to talk to one another because they can't have their phones.
That's great. It's almost sad that it has to come to this. It's like this reverse way of working. I remember talking too much at school, and we did not have phones to be able to do that. And it's like we had to kind of go around to get back to this point, which is like more in person communication. But I do think it's really important for connection, especially when we saw what happens on the opposite side. So one thing I did want to ask about, obviously, with being in your role for 5 years, but teaching for longer, is talking about the part that we want to forget, which is COVID. You know, I always am curious from people that were either in the classroom or leaders about how do you feel? Like we know what reports say, and I feel like, overwhelmingly the reports point to way like a lot of just harm basically with the education system. But talk to me about how do you actually feel about what happened during COVID and what the recovery has looked like?
So during COVID, I was actually a testing coordinator at Patrick Henry High School in Roanoke, Virginia. And when schools shut down and COVID hit, there was no way for us to actually test the kids to say you met your graduation requirements. So everyone had to pivot on the spot to say, this kid has the skills they need to graduate and go to the next level. We didn't know or understand how to give the standardized test in groups or individually when you have 2,000 kids that need to test. So, yeah, the first thing they came up with was the class of 2020. If they pass the class, they graduate. Like they get the testing credits, and that was that whole school year. Now we're down to, okay, none of the students currently in high school were in high school at the time. Um, I think that when we were shut down, the current sixth graders were actually in kindergarten. So we still have another 3 or 4 years before they get to the high school level. And what we've noticed is their reading skills are not there, especially for like this class right now, because they were shut down in the third, fourth, and fifth grade, where your reading skills really start to, I guess, come up levels. You really notice the reading improvements and the spelling. So they didn't get that. And the testing scores actually show it. But the thing that we see most is the lack of soft skills, the lack of communication, the lack of empathy, and the lack of acceptance among students and their peers. When they were out for so long, they learned how to hide behind their screens and push their words out without consequence. And now we see that they still feel like their words on the screen should not have consequences, and everything needs to be on the screen. That's the other thing that we see. Like no matter what happens these days, they want to put it on a screen for everyone to see and for everybody to have that entertainment. There was a car accident. The car was on its side. No one was helping, but 20 people were out videoing. Like you hear people screaming, but you would rather be the one that posts this and get the likes for it versus putting your phone down and going to help. So, one of the things that COVID taught us was the use of technology, because if I'm not mistaken, that's when TikTok really started to grow and to become popular. All of these videos where you could do different things and manipulate like your presence on the video, and that's where we are today. Like there's still like TikTok is still like one of the most, popular platforms for students because they're still making the videos and they're still trying to get those likes. And it has basically crushed our social hierarchies because that's the concern. Can I get on screen? Can I get the likes? And how do I make it better? How do I get more?
That's very interesting because again, this wasn't something that was always a point of concern. And I feel like it has ramped up so quickly. Like if you think about it's just been 5 years, but in 5 years, it's, beyond doubled as far as like what this actual problem is. And I think something that always comes to mind when kind of thinking about just how kids interact in a school is nobody wants to pull all the fun things from the kids. Like I always think about when I was in school and what things I enjoyed and you know, but there is a cost to having some of this stuff in the schools that, leadership has truly had to evaluate and ultimately decide to remove from the schools. And it makes total sense. I think it's just a very like uncomfortable thing for like a lot of the kids where they kind of feel like why can't we have this? Why don't we get to do, what it is that we want to do? And I imagine that you see it more in high school than any area. Obviously, I think the middle school, they kind of do a little bit of TikTok and stuff too, but definitely the high schoolers. So I think my last question is kind of thinking through the harmony of just like technology in schools. Obviously, we need to always have more um access to technology. It makes it easier for teachers, it makes it easier for students. But we know what comes along with it, whether it's a phone, a computer, or whatever. So I think my question is what role should technology play in today's like educational environment? I know you kind of talked a little bit about it earlier, saying like, there is some points of evaluation that need to happen, but just more from a perspective of the feels of it. Like, what should it feel like when technology is brought into a school?
I think when we bring technology into a school, it should feel safe for everyone. I think that sort of sounds like, well, what do you mean safe? Well, for me and for my daughter, when we went through school and some of the other people, we learned how to write. And I'm not just talking about, oh, I can compose a sentence, but can you physically pick up a pencil and write out a sentence where it's legible enough for someone to read? And most of them cannot. And that's one of the skills that they need because it's the fine motor skills that you develop over time. Technology needs to look like, it needs to look different for every grade level. You know, the kindergarten through second grade, they need to develop the fine motor skills and the soft skills. So I think technology for them should be pulled away. Like, do you really need technology at that early age? Then for like grades 3 through 5, which are more elementary, yes, learn how to start creating and being on the computer, learning how to use the tablets. But is this like everything that you need, or is it comprehensive for everything that you need? And again, I would say that the answer is no. It also teaches our students that everything is instantaneous because I can ask Google for an answer and it will pop up for me. Like, I don't have to put in the work. So I think technology takes away some of our work ethic. So I think we should introduce technology to the elementary students, but not necessarily allow them to always use the technology for what they need. Middle school, I think that we start with more of the technology. And by the time they get to high school, technology can be front and center. But I think that if we are going to put technology front and center into a student's life, that they need to say or choose a path where technology is going to remain front and present in their life.
That makes total sense. And I agree because I do think it's important for us to help them get savvy when it's needed and when it's not, and just use it as like a crutch all the time for everything. One thing I wanted to ask in talking about this is, of course, I work with Lightspeed Technologies where we offer instructional audio solutions, which means audible and intelligible sound in the classroom through a speaker and microphone system. Um, I know you haven't really had the chance to experience Lightspeed, but one thing I always want to ask people, whether they have the system or not, is to talk about or think about what role sound plays in the classroom. And the reason that I like to ask this question is primarily because when people think about what kind of tools that are used in the classroom, we often point to things like a computer, you know, a panel, whatever the case may be, as these tools that are super essential for classrooms. But to us at Lightspeed, we really think, voice and sound is where everything flows through. And so, talk to me about whether you've even considered that sound is kind of like the piece that holds it all together. And talk to me about what do you feel like thinking about it now, like what the importance of it is.
In the high school, we have a lot of students with sensory issues, so they want noise canceling headphones. So I would envision Lightspeed making a system where a student could put on headphones that the teacher could speak to him through, but still block out all of the noise that they hear. So I wouldn't say a speaker and the sound in the classroom. I would envision more headphones to help the student connect more to the teacher and actually focus on this is what my teacher is saying to me.
I love that you said it that way. And obviously, one of the things that we have done is we have these like one-to-one things for like people that have devices and impairments. But as you're talking about this, I think that's such a great point that, it kind of even goes beyond that now at this point of what does it look like to connect one-to-one with a child and what does it look like beyond impairments, which is kind of where we got our start at, but we've obviously branched off since then. So thank you for that. And always just curious, like what comes to mind for people when they think about light speed and intelligible sound, because a lot of times people don't think about it at all, especially because, our main focus is around the teacher wearing a microphone. And I don't think teachers even consider how much strain is on their voices all day, every day. I know the fun thing we always say is, teachers love to use their teacher voice. Um, Not realizing that one, that is super harmful for them, and two, it's an inconsistent sound for students. So obviously, I know teachers are doing their best, but the reality is, that octave can't stay at that same tone all day long. Your voice just gets fatigued over time. And teachers talk, 6, 7 hours a day for the most part, even more sometimes because you have to talk through your lunch and have these side meetings and all these different things. So it's constant strain on your voice. And so we like to draw attention to the fact that this is happening and a microphone can't help. So
Think this. And then the other piece would be like, I know some of the AI now translates for people. And with all of the people or students that we have where English is their second language, but teachers are teaching in English, how great would it be if they had these headphones that did the translations for them so that they could learn in real time with their peers that really do speak English and be able to take these tests and learn and be able to do the same things that their peers are doing in real time instead of sitting there and feeling like they're the outsider.
I love it. And we are there. We are there. We have live translation like here. So we partner with someone. And so that's another good point. We did not touch on this in the interview, but I do think just bringing it up briefly, it's important that the classroom is composed of so many different things happening all at one time. And I think English as a second language unless it's like a big primary thing in your school or school district, people are not always thinking about it that way. But, you know, even if it's one student, it's one student that still needs to receive the material. And so that pathway to making sure they can receive it while they are learning, because, you know, their goal is to learn, you know, English, but it is a process. As we all know, if anybody has ever tried to learn another language, it is never easy. And I feel like the older you get, the worse it is to try to do. That, you know, in that interim, they're not feeling left out, because I think the big picture for us is always being equitable and being inclusive. Like that is what we desire to do by just having something here where people can all experience the same like classroom. So 2 fun questions to close us out, and I'm gonna let you go. Really easy. I always kind of think about this as my lightning round. So the first question is, just put on your magic hat and think of, if you could change one thing about the educational landscape, what would it be?
Oh, wow. So if I could just like wave a magic wand and get rid of anything, I think it would be the requirements for school lunch to be healthy. I know that sounds crazy, but we have so many students who don't want school lunch. Like when I was in school, school lunch was so good. It was like, oh my gosh, like we were running to the cafeteria to get the big baked potatoes with the chili and the french fries and the pizza. Now it's like, yeah.
I love that you said that, and that's so honest. Like that is such an honest thing where it's like this makes a difference. And I do think it's interesting because we ask this question on every podcast, and some people will say like food insecurity, like we want to remove that as a whole. But some of the pathway to like even removing food insecurity is still enjoying the actual food. So, you know,
Right. You gotta want to eat it.
yeah, so that's a good one actually. And then my final question is, of course, focus on sound. So, what's your favorite sound in the whole world?
Music.
I
So if I had to pick like a sound out of music, it would be a good guitar string.
love it. That's a unique one. I feel like we get lots of different music, so that's a unique one.
If you find that music chord that just makes you do anything, like it makes you happy, it makes you sad, it makes you remember it, like it for me it's just music. And I grew up in the South and with the blues music and the guitars, and so a good guitar rip is always for me.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Trotter. This has been so informative and so good to just hear from someone in the schools doing the work. I wish you much success. And I want to thank you and invite you to come back anytime to talk about anything great going on in your school. I'll be more than happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite.
That's all for today's active listener. Thanks for tuning in. Share your comments on this episode on our Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn social media pages. You can visit our website at lightspeed-tech.com to learn more about our mission to ensure every student hears every word. And subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Until next time, let your listening be as active as your learning.